What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Ben Conrad here from Throw the X. Welcome to the Monday Night Review. And what a Monday night it was. I don't want to skip around. I'm not going to do that. I want to start from the very beginning and work my way into the main event. So please bear with me, people, while I try my best to contain my inner fangirl for the next 10 minutes or so. Okay, let's see. A couple things from last night. We had Nikki Cross make her Raw debut in a 6-woman tag match, which we'll get to in a bit. We saw the Intercontinental Championship change hands, which we will also get to in a bit. We saw the debut of Heavy Machinery, kind of, I guess. And then the major news coming out of Raw last night is we saw the Braun Strowman versus Brock Lesnar plans at the Royal Rumble officially scrapped. So yeah, a lot of stuff went down. We have a lot to talk about. Let's start with the big news. Let's start with the reason that Braun Strowman was pulled from the Universal title match at the Royal Rumble. Now, the storyline is that while in the beginning of Raw, Braun Strowman was searching for Baron Corbin. Braun tore the door off a limo that was out in the parking lot, and it turned out to be Vince McMahon's. Okay, so the boss shows up, and he tells Strowman he's going to be fined $100,000. Strowman argued with him, and you don't argue with the boss. Everyone knows that. So then Vince responded by telling Strowman he was out of the match at the Royal Rumble. Seems a little excessive, I guess. And it also seemed to me like it was kind of a lazy way to get Strowman out of the match. You know, especially given the fact that the plan has been for some time now for a different challenger for Brock Lesnar, even though they've continued to advertise Strowman for the match. Okay, so now you know the storyline reasoning for changing the match, but there's a lot more to the story than what we saw on Raw. Okay, ever since the squash match, I'm not sure if you guys remember the squash match between Lesnar and Strowman at Crown Jewel, it's not really a secret that Braun has kind of cooled down, you know, quite a bit, really. Whether it was the heel turn they experimented with or aligning him with Ziggler and McIntyre for a few weeks. The point is that for whatever reason, he wasn't really able to maintain that luster that he once had. And Vince McMahon knew this, and his thinking was that taking another loss to Lesnar at the Rumble would just simply do too much unnecessary damage to Braun Strowman. Which makes sense. Okay, and so some of you are probably sitting there wondering, well, why don't they just put Strowman over at the Rumble? Wouldn't that solve the problem? Well, in theory, that makes sense, and it seems like an obvious solution, but this is a classic case of WWE being caught in a backwards booking trap. Their plan is for Seth Rollins to take the strap off of Lesnar at WrestleMania, and it's been their plan for quite a while. So, they already know their end game. Now the focus is on how they get from point A to point B without screwing too much up in the process. You can't have Braun Strowman win at the Royal Rumble because that would directly affect their WrestleMania plans, right? If all of that wasn't reason enough to change the plans, it's widely believed anyways that Strowman isn't even cleared by the medical team for the problems he's had with his elbow. Okay, so group all of this together, and all this leads us to WWE's solution, which is to find another opponent to feed the beast, because that's what's going to happen. Now, that opponent was decided last night in a Fatal 4-Way main event. It was between John Cena, Baron Corbin, Finn Balor, and Drew McIntyre. Now, if you've yet to watch Monday Night Raw, I encourage you to do so, obviously. And if for some reason you're relying on me to spoil the show for you, that's fine too. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer because I want to save my thoughts on that until the end of the show. And believe me, I've got plenty of thoughts on the subject. Let's go back and talk about a couple things, a couple notes that are worth mentioning, but not exactly newsworthy, not exactly me going into too much detail about. Sasha Banks and Ronda Rousey defeated Tamina Snuka and Nia Jax. The Revival defeated Lucha House Party. A lot of tag matches. I'm going down the card right now, and I'm looking at my screen, and there was a lot of tag matches last night. The next one was a 6-woman tag match. It was Bayley, Natalya, and the debuting Nikki Cross, who defeated the Riot Squad. Nikki Cross got a nice little pop, which was expected. And maybe next week I'll talk a little more about Nikki. Because, I mean, she definitely brings something different to the women's division, and it's something that really is worth talking about. So, yeah, maybe next week we'll do that. If not, then sometime in the next couple weeks for sure. Next we had a backstage segment with Jinder Mahal. He was basically pleading his case to Vince McMahon about wanting a title shot, blah, blah, blah. Vince told him to pick a challenger out of the 4 guys that were in the main event, and if he wins, he'll take their place in the Fatal 4-Way. He ended up choosing Finn Balor, which turned out to be a terrible decision on Mahal's part because he ended up getting his ass kicked. During this segment, as I'm sure many of you did the same, I assumed that Finn would end up sustaining some sort of injury during this match with Jinder, which would allow for an excuse for him not winning the Fatal 4-Way later in the night. I mean, logically, that made the most sense to me. I assumed that by doing that, you could have him lose without really doing much damage to his build, and then it would open the door for, John Cena or Drew McIntyre to get the pin or submission on Baron Corbin. Okay, this actually turned out not to be the case, and I'll tell you why. After I talk about the Intercontinental Triple Threat match. I know I've brought it up now about 3 times without really going into any detail and giving much away, but I promise this is all leading to that. I will get to it. But first, the Intercontinental Triple Threat match between Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Bobby Lashley. This was actually a good match. And on any other episode of Raw, I think it could have main evented without question. And I know I've said things, just as recently as last week about how Dean Ambrose is incapable of putting on a main event type match. And I stand by everything that I've said because, honestly, it was Seth Rollins in this one that brought the main event quality to this match. Of course, I wouldn't feel right if I didn't mention a couple spots by Bobby Lashley during the match that were just fantastic. He had a choke slam on Rollins, which I think was supposed to be more of a spine buster. I mean, that's what the announce team called it, but it looked more like a choke slam to me. Either way, he got Rollins about 10 feet in the air, and it came across really nice on TV. And another spot came at the end with a absolutely just picture-perfect spear he had on Dean Ambrose. So yeah, props to Lashley on those couple moves. They came across really well. Great job, really, by all 3 of these guys, but Dean Ambrose still just doesn't really do much for me. That's just my opinion, whatever. I mean, a lot of people feel differently, to each his own. Anyway, Lashley wins the match and is now the new Intercontinental Champion. Congratulations, Bobby Lashley. Now, the reason why I said that match couldn't have main evented on any other episode of Raw is because on this particular episode, the main event was packed with 3 main eventers and Baron Corbin. In a match that was pretty good technically, I guess, from a technical standpoint, it was the stipulation that really brought out the energy from the crowd. And from the people watching at home, I assume. The fact that the winner of the match will go on to face Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, it's a very big deal. Especially since both Finn Balor and Drew McIntyre are guys that have a strong fan base that's been very vocal about getting these guys their push or their opportunity, whatever you want to call it. In a main event match at the Royal Rumble isn't something that just comes knocking on everybody's door. I felt like the crowd was clearly behind Finn Balor in this one from start to finish. And to the delight and really the surprise of a lot of us, we saw Finn Balor get the clean pin on John Cena. Okay, so like I said earlier, if I had to guess the outcome of this match, I'd say whoever wins will almost certainly pin or submit Baron Corbin, right? If I didn't see it with my own eyes and you came up to me and told me that John Cena was the one that was going to take a clean pin, I'd tell you to close out my bar tab and call me an Uber because I've clearly drank myself into hallucination territory. But this actually happened. Finn Balor is now main eventing the Royal Rumble in Phoenix, which I will be attending live, I'm excited to say. But here's the thing. It's never fun to end a show on a negative note, but let's all come back down to earth for a second. While this is great for Balor, it's great for his push, it's great for his case to be pushed, Balor will unfortunately lose at the Royal Rumble. I think it's going to be a fantastic match, as Brock Lesnar really likes working with the smaller, more technical type guys who can carry a match, like Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles. But fantastic or not, Balor will join both Bryan and Styles as two guys who have also put on great matches with Lesnar, only to fall short of winning. The plan, like I've said plenty of times, is for Rollins to beat Lesnar at WrestleMania in New York, which I will also be attending. So, if you're a fan of Finn Balor, or perhaps you're just somebody who's getting impatient with the Brock Lesnar title run, which you aren't exactly few and far between, my advice to you is to just enjoy the moment, let Finn put on a great wrestling match at the Royal Rumble, and you got to just trust that his time is coming. And if this is any indication, his time is coming very soon. And I'm excited for it. So, yeah, that was Monday Night Raw. Everybody, thank you all for tuning in. And make sure to tune in this weekend. Jay and I will be back with a brand new episode of our flagship Throw the Podcast. And, of course, we'll talk more about the Royal Rumble plans with Finn Balor and the changes going on and a whole lot more. So tune into that. Also tune into the Tuesday night review with Jay tomorrow. The guy's got the voice of an angel. Okay, like his vocal cords were dipped in the same liquid as Achilles. So join Jay for that. Also look for us on Twitter at TTX Wrestling. That is at TTX Wrestling. And I don't know. Tweet at me, bro. See y'all next week.